Live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh, it's the Science Café with your host, Chris Smith.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Science Cafe. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name's Chris. I'm your host every Thursday night for our program right here inside the Daily Planet Cafe, where you can spend your Thursday evening doing the most exciting thing you can think of, and that's learn something new, right? Everybody agrees. Yeah, being at the Science Cafe, yeah, we have a lot of fun. We bring in experts on all kinds of topics, people who know a lot about stuff, invite them up on stage to talk a little with us about what they know, and then we get the chance to talk back. My favorite part of every cafe is the audience questions. What kind of information do you want to get from the experts that we've invited in? And we can create discussion, and we always have an interesting talk. Every single Science Cafe. It's a lot of fun. Tonight we're going to be talking about backyard chickens. Who's got chickens? Yeah, I figured with this one there'd be a few folks wanting to get some of that deep insider, those tips and tricks, right? Who wants chickens? Yeah, even more people, including some of the people who already had chickens. I hope it's going okay for you. I don't, but my wife keeps saying we should get them, and I keep saying, I don't know. It sounds scary. And then I talk to people like our guest speaker, Frank Hyman, tonight, who say things like, you could manage it. And I go, I don't know. I dress up and talk for a living. That's what I do. So, but I will say, I was flipping through before we got started, I was flipping through Frank's book, Hentopia, and it really does kind of make it look pretty easy. Like it's something that even somebody like me can handle. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more tonight. Our guest, Frank, he's a garden designer, a writer. He's written for the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. He's a regular columnist for magazines like Chickens, which makes a lot of sense. But also, I think it was Fine Gardening, Organic Gardening, a whole host of publications where you can find his work. So I think we've got somebody who knows a whole lot about this particular topic. And he even brought props. So I don't know. Did you bring a chicken? No, you weren't allowed to do that. Couldn't bring a chicken. But please put your hands together and welcome to the stage. Oh, wait, not yet. I almost forgot an announcement. Some housekeeping. There are blue pieces of paper on the table. We are part of a national survey to collect data on science events like the Science Cafe nationwide. So after the program tonight, if you can give us just a few minutes, no more than 5 minutes, we're going to pass out a survey towards the end. Fill out the survey and then leave that on the table at the end of the night. And that way you are helping us make events like this better and helping us learn more about how we get science out there into the public. Okay, commercial over. I have another commercial to make. Oh my gosh, I'm too excited about these chickens. At the end of the program, we have an extra special treat. So, while you're thinking about the work you have to do for the survey, we'll be getting poetry from a group called Living Poetry who's in the house tonight. They're right up here. During the program, they will be scribing their thoughts in poetic form, and then they'll be sharing their work with us at the end of the night. So everything you're going to hear later comes from our speaker to their minds through their pens. So it's always a lot of fun. And they were out here just a couple of weeks ago, and it was a great time. This is going to be a great cafe. I'm so glad you're all here. Did I cover it all? I got thumbs up. Put your hands together and welcome to the stage, author Frank Hyman.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So I kind of have to be honest with you. Me and my wife have chickens, but it was kind of like a thing with Chris and his wife, where my wife wanted chickens. I've worked with lots of different animals. I've worked with loggerhead sea turtles, wild rhesus monkeys, cattle, pigs. I even lasted one day on an egg farm. But I was like not keen on having chickens because I love going on vacation for 2 weeks. And everybody I knew that had chickens was always fretting about that. They were always like missing out on vacation or having to scare up a chicken sitter. And so, but my wife wanted chickens, and I love my wife. I believe happy wife, happy life. And so I naively decided it'll be fine, Frank. I'll just read the chicken books and I'll do what everybody else does. That was a mistake. I was reading the chicken books, and these are nice books, but they're mostly about the chickens. But they all would say things, I'll just give you one example. They would all say things like, water is very important. And so you will have to go out there every day to clean the waterer because they will have pooped all over it. And I remember reading that and thinking, I don't want to work for the chickens. I'm already working for my dog. So we can't be like multiplying Frank's honeydew list. So I'm the carpenter and designer in the house, so I decided I'm going to figure out some ways to make it a lot easier, make it so we can go on vacation for 2 weeks. And that's how this book came about. It actually started out as a column in Chickens magazine. And there's also backyard poultry. We are in America, so there's multiple choices in magazines about poultry. And so all of that work led to this book, which is 21 projects are in here. All of them are low tech, low cost, low skill, low maintenance. So this is not for the Martha Stewart crowd. So, and last thing I want to say about on that front is that, yes, it is a how-to book, but it's also a love story. But it's a love of my wife, not so much chicken. Chickens are great. I will warn you, there is a hazard. If you become a chicken person, people will start giving you chicken tchotchkes. So just be ready for that. Another thing I should warn you about, and this is, we're going to start off a little science, but it's a little behavioral science of chickens. A lot of the talks I do, most of the people already have chickens. This is the rare crowd where most folks don't have chickens. And in science, behavioral science sense, I don't want you to be expecting too much from your chickens. And let me start by asking you a question. I'm not going to get into politics here, but just if chickens had the right to vote, do you think they'd be voting Democratic or Republican? Independent? No. One thing you'll find out when you get your chickens is they are not pacifists. They are not vegetarians. They do not believe in equality. And even if you only have hens, they will not be feminists. So I'm just offering that. Just don't be having unrealistic expectations of your chickens. They have, all animals, their way of looking at each other is with a sense of hierarchy. That's where the term pecking order comes from, is chickens. There'll be a alpha hen and somebody at the bottom and everybody else sorting out their position. So as long as you give them good conditions, and I'm going to describe some things, they will get along pretty well. So I'm going to show you now, I'm going to do a little slideshow, show you a few things from our Hentopia setup. And then I'm going to demonstrate a couple of items that are very low-tech, things that you can build even if you don't have carpentry skills, and they're very inexpensive to put together. And while I'm doing that, I will take questions. So if you have a question on something I'm showing you or talking about, just go ahead and raise your hand, and someone will bring you a microphone, and then I'll take your question. Okay, does that sound good? So what we're looking at here, this is our backyard Hentopia, and yeah, there we go. So you'll notice the roof here. When I was working on my drawings on what this was going to look like, I asked my wife, what did she want the coop to be like? And I thought she's going to say, oh, paint it yellow or blue, or cut out a nice round window. Instead, she asked me, can it have a pagoda roof, like a Buddhist temple? And so I'm like, oh my God, what have I let myself in for? But then I decided I'll just ask Dr. Google, and Google will find me some instructions. But 2 days with Dr. Google, and there are no drawings, no sketches of how to make that beautiful curve on a pagoda roof. Lots of pictures, but no drawings. So I had to do a little guerrilla carpentry. And what's relevant for y'all about that is that each of these 4 hips, each of these 4 corners, none of them are the same length. None of them are the exact same curve, but they look good And more importantly, they don't leak. The roof does not leak. And why that's important to you is that if you're building the coop and you don't have a lot of construction experience, obviously you want to aim for things like making it level and plumb and square. But if you're not able to make it perfectly plumb, level, and square, that's not a disaster. That's not a problem. As long as the roof will shed water and the foundation keeps it off the ground, everything will be fine. And let me prove that by asking, who here lives in an older house? Right. Is your house plumb, level, and square? Right. No. Is it going to fall down tomorrow? Well, your house, maybe next week for you, but I think everybody else is going to be fine. You have to find older. So my point being that don't be frustrated if you can't make everything come out perfectly square and even and everything. It's not exactly necessary. Even nature is not a believer in perfection. So you don't have to be either. So a little bit more about our setup is the coop is just a cube, 5 feet by 5 feet by 5 feet, set up off the ground, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And the pen is some cedar poles, but you can use 4x4s. Pressure-treated wood is fine. Cedar poles are fine. But the important thing is this little structure here on the side is the nest box. A lot of chicken coops and a lot of books will recommend putting the nest boxes on the inside of the coop, but I think you want to put them on the outside. The reason being that if it's inside the coop, then you're going to have to go inside the coop. You're probably going to have to go through the pen, which means every time you want to gather some eggs, you're putting on your muck boots, you're going through the gate into the pen without the chickens escaping, you're walking through chicken poop and muck to go inside the coop and gather eggs, and then you're reversing that process, going through the gate again without the chickens making a mad dash, getting your muck boots off, et cetera, et cetera. So in the time that I was figuring out how to do this, I was instructed by the livestock manager that I would put a nest box on the outside and there would be a stepping stone path from the nest box to the kitchen door. So when my wife is baking, she likes to make her own pizza dough, she makes pasta, she bakes bread, and so she's making something and needs eggs, she can just go outside with her slippers straight to the nest box, gather the eggs, and go back into the house without having to engage in all that bother. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about more about the nest box, and I've got a sample of one to show you here. So let's see. So I went to the nest box one day to gather eggs, and each of the 3 boxes was filled by a chicken. So the rule of thumb is you want one nest box for every 5 chickens. But if you have fewer nest boxes than that, it's no big deal. When the chicken feels the egg coming on, it's time to lay the egg, and she goes in and the nest boxes are all full, she's just going to do the same thing that you and I do when it's time to go to the bathroom and all the stalls are full. It's like we just wait. And so they will wait. Because it takes about a day for the egg to go through its whole process. In the last half hour or so, before it's time to lay the egg, it's low in the oviduct, and that's when they head to the nest box. So they're only in there for about 20 or 30 minutes. And they're sitting down waiting. And as the egg is at that last spot and is about to drop, do you know what they do? They stand up to lay the egg. So they stand up, drop the egg out, and that's why you want to have bedding in the nest box to give it a little bit of a cushion. So you'll notice, so those of you who have chickens and have a nest box, or if you've been looking at them and looking at books, if you have seen them mounted outside the chicken coop, you've probably noticed that in most cases, the access is through the roof, that the roof opens up like a toolbox lid, right? And I don't recommend that you do that. I recommend that you open up a wall, which I call this wall the hatch, right? Because if the roof is the access, there's 2 big problems with that. One is that you've got a hinge up at the top edge and rain can get in through there, which is a problem. The other problem is that when you lift up the roof, you've got to be pretty tall to reach in there or to see in there to see if there's even any eggs, right? Think about that. My wife is 4'10". And when we want the neighborhood kids to come help, that kind of setup wouldn't work. And so that's why I recommend having a hatch so this wall opens up and lays down to make a little table. And so here's Michaela. She's one of our neighbors. I asked her mom if Michaela would come over for a little photo shoot to help me demonstrate this point, and they show up, and Michaela has like 3 changes of clothes and multiple little hair things, and her nails painted in alternating colors, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but I learned a lot from Michaela. So you can see here with the hatch open, it makes a little table because there's a support arm, and I'll show you that on my little model, on my demo. It's a little support arm that swings out and holds the hatch as a table. So you can set your egg carton down with both hands. You're like grabbing eggs, filling them up. If you're at the nest box and you need to clean it out, then you just leave the support arm put away and the hatch swings and hangs all the way down, and then you can just sweep it out. Easy peasy. Yeah. I'm sorry, say that again? He's asking, how do you tell if there's chickens in each box before you open it up? And you can't tell, and it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not opening it up. I'm not aiming to be there when the chickens are in there. I'm checking to see if there's eggs.
But you're worried about maybe some escaping?
No.
Would any escape when you open that up?
Am I worried about any escaping? No, I'm not. No, because I'm standing right there. If somebody's making a leap for it, I just like slam it shut, and they decide, okay, well, we'll try again next day. So what I want to show you real quickly here is just a couple of tools. I know a lot of folks are intimidated by the idea of doing some carpentry in their backyard, and mostly it's around tools like circular saws, which even if you're a professional carpenter, circular saws are dangerous, and they're loud. And they have this weird, no matter which brand you get, they all have this weird habit that as you're cutting, the sawdust is all going to shoot in a stream right into your eye. So you don't need a circular saw. This is called a jigsaw or a saber saw. So the blade on it is the size of my finger, literally. So the motor is much smaller. It's much quieter. It's less powerful. It's not going to jump around and attack you or bite you the way a circular saw will do. So this is a tool that lets you do pretty much everything a circular saw would do. Plus it lets you cut that cool circular window that your spouse wants. The other thing I want to say about tools real quickly is that if you're not a professional, you might be intimidated by the idea of using a hammer and nails, and you should be, because not only is it easy to bend a whole lot of nails when you're just starting it out, but it's easy to like smash your finger or smash your thumb, and that's no fun. The other problem with hammer and nail is that the nails don't hold real well. Anybody who's walked around on a deck and some of the nails are backing out, you know what I'm talking about. Screws and a drill gun are much better tools, especially for novices. So the screw works a lot better because it has threads. So it's when you screw 2 pieces of wood together, they're going to stay together. But they also gives you the advantage if you ever want to change it. You want to adjust your nest box or the coop or the gate or something, or you want to move it, or you're going to move to another place. You can then use the drill gun and take it all apart, which you can't. It's hard to do that with nails. So using screws and a drill. Don't succumb to the temptation to buy a battery-powered drill. They are nice to have, especially if you're on a farm and you got to do something on the back 40 and you don't have 2 miles of extension cord. A battery-powered drill is great. But if you're doing backyard projects, they cost a lot more. The battery runs down when you're like 90% of the way through your project, and then the battery eventually dies and you have to buy another one for like $80 or $90. Instead, just buy what I'm showing here, which is a drill with a cord. They only cost $60 versus $150 or $200 for a battery-powered drill. So these have more power, don't run down, and cost a whole lot less. So that's the way I would go as far as tools. In terms of making a nest box or any other part of the coop, you may want to use plywood. I recommend 3/4-inch plywood because it's thick enough. You can put a screw through the edge and it'll hold a screw. It also doesn't delaminate as easily as thin pieces of plywood. But plywood has its own set of problems. One is that their pieces of plywood are big, and so you want to have a pickup truck to bring them home. The other problem is even professionals, we don't like having to cut plywood. You lay a piece of plywood on a sawhorse, there's a guy nodding, you've had this experience, right? It's not fun. And you're reaching all the way across. It's real unwieldy, it's dangerous. But you don't have to do that. So here is a sketch I have with the dimensions for a nest box, and everything I'm showing you is explained in detail in the book. And so here, this is a 4-foot by 4-foot sheet of plywood, hard for you to carry, hard to put in your vehicle, hard to cut it at home. But at the big box store, you can make marks for, so here's the roof, here's the floor, here's the hatch, here are the walls that support it, and then a few pieces of scrap wood at the top and a scrap piece on the side over here. I'm going to learn how to use this one day. So you make the marks on the piece of plywood at the big box store, and then they cut it for you. So this is called a panel saw, and what you're seeing here, this yellow thing, is a circular saw that's mounted on some rails. So it can cut perfectly in a vertical line, or they reorient it and then cut it perfectly in a horizontal line. And the first 2 cuts are free, and after that each cut is like 50 cents. So they'll cut it all for you, very safe, and then here you are throwing all these little pieces of plywood in the back of your crappy hatchback because you don't even have a pickup truck. So easy to bring that home. And then you break out your saber saw because you will have to make a little diagonal cut on the top of the wall pieces. But you can do that because you've got the right tool. And then with your drill, you're going to pre-drill some holes for the screws to put everything together. And there's the roof is put on. You can screw in some hinges on the bottom, some latches on the top to keep raccoons from getting into it. And there's your support arm on the bottom. It's a little piece of 2x2 that swings, so it's got one screw in it, but it's not put in tightly all the way. It's kind of loose, so the arm can swing out. I'm going to skip over a couple images here. So this is for a longer class. And the last thing I'm going to show you on the slideshow is the biggest expense in having chickens is obviously the coop. And I grew up working class, so in my mind, in working on this, I was thinking, like, how do I come up with something that somebody without a lot of money can have a coop? And the way to do that is to use pallets, because just about every business is throwing away tons of pallets. So heating and air conditioning places have them, feed and seed stores have them, grocery stores sometimes have them, and they want to get rid of them. And so when you show up and say, can I have like 10 or 20 pallets, they're like, please take them. So yes. Yes.
Construction going on.
Yes.
And somebody told me that all I had to do was go to one of these new home building sites, and the people who are constructing the homes usually have a bin out in front by the road, and they throw away a bunch of all kinds of lumber that is perfect for making a chicken coop, including treated lumber as well, which I don't know how you feel about that. But anyway, yeah, there was all the wood that you need. That's how we ended up building our coop almost for free with that wood.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, that's definitely another option, another way to go at it. In fact, I have a whole chapter that is just about ways to get materials for your chicken setup that are free or low cost. You can get roofing from metal scrap yards. You can get the pallets. You can get lumber from different places. And a lot of our coops set up, a lot of the feeder, the original feeder, and even the fencing was salvaged. People were throwing it away. So there's lots of cost-effective ways to get materials, and from construction sites is definitely one of them. As far as you asked about pressure-treated wood used to be really bad. It had chromium in it, it had arsenic in it, and those were highly toxic chemicals that were infused into the wood to keep fungus from rotting the wood. The EPA put a lot of pressure on the lumber companies, and they have stopped using chromium and arsenic. Now they use copper, liquid copper, which is the same material your water pipes are made of. And they use another chemical that's the same thing as like 409 spray cleaner, like spraying on your countertops. So you don't want to drink it, but it's like the toxicity is way low compared to the arsenic that used to be in pressure-treated wood. So I don't have a problem with using pressure-treated wood, but what I'm going to show you is a setup that allows you to build your coop without using any pressure-treated wood. So and what I'm going to show you here is a coop built out of pallets that I built for a friend, a new friend. I was hanging out at a feed and seed store, and I'm looking at the little chicks that are there, and there's a woman next to me looking at the chicks, and we start talking, and turns out she's a single woman, first grade teacher, doesn't have a lot of money, but she has a little bit of land, wants to have a little farm. And so she already has pigs that she's raising for slaughter, and she wants to have chickens. She wanted, and her dream was to have like a coop where she could have like a dozen lavender Orpingtons, which I've heard of buff Orpingtons. I never knew there was a lavender Orpington. So there's a lavender Orpington, high dollar chicken. She wanted to raise a dozen of those so she could sell the eggs and the chicks for really good money. And then she wanted in a separate part of the coop, so it'd be like a duplex coop. In the separate part, she'd have a dozen copper Morans, which are the ones that lay the chocolate-colored eggs. Oh man, if they were only made all of chocolate, would that not be? If chicken keeping could be even more popular, that would do it. So she's telling me about this dream of hers, and then she goes, but I have no budget, like none. And so I tell her, well, this is perfect because I have a design for building a coop with almost no budget because it's all made out of whole pallets. And she had a pickup truck. So I told her, get 16 pallets, bring them to your house. I'll meet you there tomorrow with my tools after lunch, and we will get started. And so I'm going to show you the steps we went through in half a day to get the coop framed and ready to be finished. And so what I'm showing you here, I'm going to go to the next slide just so you can get a better idea. So this is how I built the floor. So the great thing about pallets is that it's like a ready-made floor system, floor joist. It's ready-made stud wall. It's ready-made roof rafters. It's ready to go. It's made to hold lots of weight. It's made to be stiff. It's made not to twist. And they are giving it away, and you can have it for free. And so for a normal backyard chicken setup where you've got 5 or 10 chickens, you would only need for floor, you'd only need these 2 pallets. That would be enough. But she wanted to have 24 chickens, so that meant like 6 pallets. Rule of thumb is that for your coop, you want 3 square feet per chicken. So 24 times 3, what is that? 72. And so 6 times 16 is how much? Somebody do some math for me. 96, thank you. So plenty for 24 chickens. And so what I originally did was I laid out 6 pallets on the ground to figure out what our footprint would be. And then I marked that footprint with blue paint that landscapers use, but you could just use a stick to mark it or some lime or flour, whatever you've got, just to mark your footprint. And then I took the pallets away, and underneath the corner of each pallet, I put a stack of 2 cinder blocks. So each pallet of these 6, each corner of that pallet would have a stack of cinder blocks under it, holding it up. And the cinder blocks are not attached to the pallet. The gravity and friction will hold everything together. The one exception, or the exceptions being if there's a hurricane or earthquake or a tree falls on it, and even if you like anchor everything together with lots of bolts and mess, it's like those 3 things are going to destroy your chicken coop anyway, so they're not necessary. So you can see here the blue marks. So I'd mark the footprint for the pallets, and then under the corner of each pallet, I've got a stack of 2 cinder blocks, which that gets you 16 inches off the ground. And what that means is that when it rains, any rain and mud that splashes up is going to land on the cinder blocks, which are not going to rot. And so the wood of your coop doesn't have to be pressure-treated wood. So this was pretty quickly put together, and I checked them, the tops for level, obviously. And some of the cinder block piles, I had to dig out an inch or 2 to get them a little bit lower. Some of them that were not high enough, I'd add a piece of wood as a shim. And so these foundation pilings are not all exactly the same height, but they're close enough for a chicken coop, right? Because we're not doing perfectionism. So I get all this figured out. We lay the pallets on top, and I've left this one pallet out so you can kind of see better what's going on in there. But that 6th one goes into place. And then every place where one pallet, so pallet A meets pallet B, I've got 3 screws coming in from B to A, and then 3 screws from A to B. 3-inch screws, exterior grade screws like you'd use to make a deck. And then same thing, you know, joining these 2 pallets together to the same team, joining these 2 and everything in between here. Gets 3 screws going both ways. So we got the floor framing is in. We cover it with some plywood to make a smooth, flat surface that's easy to clean. And then we put in some stud walls. So we turn some pallets on their side. And again, every place that one pallet meets another pallet, there's 3 screws going in each direction. So it's very stiff, it's very solid. You don't need bolts to hold it together, partly because the pallets are such a stiff frame. So it's almost like getting your chicken coop from IKEA, but easier. Now you see the roof, I had to frame that myself because it was so large. And I'm going to go back to that. There we go. That's the one I want. But for you, for 5 or 10 chickens, you just need like these 2 pallets. That's a big enough floor. You follow me with that? And what that means is that, again, with this, you put your walls up of the pallets laid on their side, and then because your coop is narrow enough, you can also use pallets to frame the roof. You know, you might need 2 people to set it up there and a 3rd person to screw it all together, but that way all of the framing is just from pallets. And then you can cover the exterior with plywood if you want, but you could also just take more pallets and cut all the nails in them using a Sawzall. Do you know what a Sawzall is? It's reciprocating saw is the other name. Among professionals, we call it the wrong tool for every job. But it comes with a metal cutting blade, and so you can cut the nails that are holding a pallet together in just a few minutes. It's much faster than using a crowbar and backing the nails out. And so that's what I showed Katie how to do. So she cut a bunch of pallets apart, and so she had all these 1x4s that she was able to use as the horizontal siding because she wanted to match her horizontal siding. My recommendation would be to put those pieces on vertically so you get like a board and batten look. You're using a lot fewer pieces and it goes a lot faster, obviously, but she wanted to match the look of her house. That's an option, but a lot quicker doing it that way. And let me point out, so we've got the foundation is in, the floor is in, the wall framing is in, and the roof framing was finished, and that took a total elapsed time of 3.5 hours, right? So what that means is once you get your tools together and you get your pallets together, you and a friend or 2 on Saturday afternoon can get this far. All the framing is up and done, and then Sunday afternoon you come back, you can put the siding on, the roofing on, cut out the door, install the nest box. So this is, using this kind of system, this is like a 2-afternoon system, and you don't have to be a carpenter. Just have to be careful enough that you can use a Sawzall to cut some of the, because you have to cut some of the pallets for the walls to be a little bit shorter to fit in. But so there we go. So there's Katie with her lavender Orpington, and because she wanted a duplex for her coop, I called it Katie's Cooplex. So any questions about what I've shown you so far? Yeah. Am I worried about predators coming through the bottom?
Since you were using the pallet, which is like, you know, can they not crawl in through the bottom? There is plywood.
She's going to answer that question for me, my assistant. And the answer is? Plywood. Yeah, so when the pallet floor framing was put in, yeah, there's gaps where some critter could come up, but we covered that with plywood. Same thing happens when the walls get put up. Obviously, there's gaps there, but you can cover it with pieces of pallets, or if you have the budget, you just cover that with cut plywood to fit with your Sawzall, with your jigsaw, and away you go. And then the roof, as you saw, was some metal roofing. So one of our first grade students, her parents own a roofing company, so they had some scrap metal, and they installed the roof. But you could put plywood up there and then cover it with rolled roofing, which is an inexpensive way to do normal shingles, asphalt shingles. Somebody back here had a question? Yes.
I'm assuming you still have to do some maintenance on this. So
yeah.
If you have to clean the inside, what do you do? Just pressure wash it or something?
You don't need to pressure wash it. What I'm not showing here is that we cut a couple of doors in the walls, one door being a way for the chickens to get in, but also some doors so that she can open it up when it's come time to clean it and just take a push broom or the flat side of a gravel rake and just rake all the bedding out. And the way I have mine set up, I don't think she did this, but I've set our coop up so that there's 2 big doors on the back, on the outside of the coop, not where the pen is, right? But on the outside, you open up those 2 big doors, and right there are our 2 compost bins. So we just sweep everything into the compost bins. There's lots of books that'll say, oh, just make the floor out of, hardware cloth, wire fencing, and the poop will magically just go through that, into the compost. But it just congeals on the wire, makes a mess. Other books say, oh, make the floor a tray, like a drawer that you pull out. And like, who wants to be holding, a tray full of chicken poop and carrying it to the compost bin? So I don't recommend that. As I was reading all these recommendations in these books, I was like, why not just bring coals to Newcastle? You put the compost bin right by the coop. It has to be somewhere. And that way, when you're ready to clean out the bedding, which has chicken poop in it, and why does the chicken coop even have poop in it? Because chickens are 24/7 pooping machines. They are pooping in their sleep while they're sitting up on the roost. Aren't you glad we don't do that? Aren't you glad your spouse doesn't do that? Right? So yeah, so there are some doors cut into this. After I'd taken those photos, I had to leave because I had to go somewhere else. But any other questions about what I've shown you about the coop or anything? Okay, so what I want to show you now is water. I mentioned early on that a lot of the books say, oh, you'll have to go out there every day and clean the water because they've pooped on it. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. So I kind of combined two concepts that I borrowed from other folks. One of them was a design professor of mine. Who knows Will Hooker? Yay, Will Hooker. So he's brilliant. And he was on the chicken coop tour. My wife and I went to see his setup and other people's chicken coops before we built ours. So the chicken coop tour is like the first weekend in June. So look for it next year. There'll be like 15 people that have experience with chickens and have coops. You pay your money to support urban ministries. They give you a map, and you tour around and see what other people are doing. It's a great way to get a sense of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Because the important thing here really is you don't have to do it the way I do it. You have to find the way to do it that makes you happy, because that's the point of being alive, is figure out how to make yourself happy and the people around you happy. And that's going to depend on you figuring out how to set up your chickens in a way that meets your budget and your time constraints and your temperament. Some people want to spend more time with their chickens than I do, and so they're happy to go out every morning and feed them and open the coop, and then go out in the evening and feed them again, and then close the coop. But I want all that stuff to kind of happen automatically. So find your own, mix and match your own concept to make it work for you. So on the coop tour, we're at Will Hooker's house, and he has a gutter set up on his chicken coop that feeds rainwater into a cistern. And he used that to fill up his waterer, which then the chickens would poop on, but at least he was gathering free water and always had plenty of water. And I saw that and I knew I'm going to do that. And then online, I saw somebody had on the bottom of my bucket here, who knows what these are called? Poultry nipples. So I dare you to call the feed and seed store and say, do you have poultry nipples? And then laugh and hang up. And then call back and ask if their refrigerator is running, right? So this is kind of becoming mainstream in the chicken world. And so these nipples they're kind of like if you've seen hamsters or gerbils, and there's a little water bottle in their pen, and they go and lick the little metal tube, and water comes out, and then when they leave it alone, no water comes out. And so this is a similar idea that basically the gravity, the weight of the water holds this little metal piece closed so water doesn't come out. And then when the chickens are licking at it or hitting it with their beak, it's moving and water is able to flow through and they drink the water. So by having a bucket like this, so I've combined these two things, and this, which is a bucket holder from FarmTek, F-A-R-M-T-E-K. And so you can mount this on the side of your coop or on a post, and it holds the bucket. The bucket slips down in here and it holds it in place. And that's important because with both the waterer and the feeder, you want it to be, if that table was the ground, you want it about that high off the ground so that the nipples are about the height of the chicken's head. Okay, so they can get up under there. Now, they won't know on their own to do that. There's two things you can do. Is one, when you screw the nipples in place, leave one of them a little bit loose so that water drips down, and they'll see the water and know that that's where they're going to get it, because you'll have to take away the saucer they've been drinking from, because they'd rather have that. So let some water drip down, or the other thing you can do is screw them all in place and then capture your alpha hen, holding both wings so she's not flapping around, and hold her up underneath there and bounce her beak against the waterer. So water is running down her face. Of course, while you're doing this, she is like screaming and crying, why are you torturing me? Why are you trying to kill me? But you're an experienced chicken keeper, so you know not to be bothered by that. And then after you do it for a minute, half a minute, you'll see the light bulb go off. And she'll see that's where the water is coming from. And then you'll probably have to do it with the other chickens, but if you're lucky, they will watch and learn. But I'm not making any promises on that. So that's the water. Any questions about that? Yes. Do you need an overflow tube? You don't need an overflow tube because this is going to be outside. Do not put a waterer in the coop. Do not put a feeder in the coop. Do not put anything in the coop except chickens. I'm going to get back to your question in a moment. It's best if you think of the coop as the box that the chickens sleep in. If you try to make it do more things than that, you will add to your maintenance hassles and cause problems. Some people worry that their chickens are going to get cold in the wintertime, even though most of the chickens we have were bred in places further north, right? And so they will put like a heater in the coop, and that's just a way for something to fail and catch fire, and worse things then happen. So it doesn't need to overflow like a rain barrel at your house, because it's not inside the coop. So if it overflows, it doesn't matter because it's out in the pen. And if it overflows, it's just overflowing where rain was falling anyway. So it's going to overflow, not a problem. So, and we have 6 chickens, and this is enough water to probably last them about 2 weeks. So if you have more chickens than that, you could get set up a second waterer so you have plenty of water, or use a larger container. You can use a garbage can, like a plastic garbage can. You could use a pickle barrel that you probably recycled to use as a rain barrel, and now it doesn't really work that well, and doesn't look good, doesn't hold much water, but it would be perfect if you have like 20 chickens. So just find the right number, the right size waterer, or the right number of them. So any other questions about the waterer? Yes.
What if it doesn't rain?
Then you will have to fill it up. But in the 6 years that we've had our chickens, I have probably filled this thing up myself, maybe twice a year. So most of the time, before it gets empty, it's going to fill back up.
So when you said that you use it from the gutter system, is that just from the coop itself, or is it off your house?
Yeah, it's from the coop, but it could be wherever if you already have a system set up, you could get it from your house. That wouldn't be a problem.
And I heard a mumble. What do you do in the winter when temperatures are below freezing?
Very good question. So when it's below freezing, what we used to do, because that only happens a few times in the winter, and for us that meant that somebody had to get up in the morning, put on the tea kettle in the kitchen, and then go out and pour some hot water in there to melt it. And by somebody, I meant Chris, because she's the livestock manager, and I'm the facilities manager, and clearly that's a livestock issue. But I knew that wasn't like a good long-term solution, and so I looked on the internet to see what people were doing, looked in books, and people were doing a lot of things that I thought were not good ideas, like they were wrapping the waterer with that heat tape, like you would use to wrap your water pipes underneath your trailer to keep it from freezing, back when we all lived in trailers and we were younger. But that works on pipes because the metal is a conduit. It conducts heat, and plastic is an insulator. It doesn't conduct heat, so it doesn't really keep your water from freezing, except it gives you a few degrees. And so I'm thinking that I'm not going to do that. But what does work is a bird bath heater. I mean, think about it. It's made to be underwater. It's made to be outside. They only cost about $20. So it's a piece of metal about the size of my hand, covered in plastic, and it has about a 6-foot length of cord. So you just pop the lid open a little bit, which is fine because we don't have mosquitoes. You're not worried about mosquitoes getting in there. And you drop the bird bath heater in the water. And most of them have a thermostat, so they're not on all the time. It's just when it gets cold enough they come on. When it warms back up, they turn off. And so you run an extension cord. Use an exterior grade extension cord. The other thing, two things you want to do is spend $2 or $3. They make a little plastic clamshell that goes over the place where your bird bath heater cord meets your extension cord, so water can't get in between there. And the other thing you want is that where the extension cord plugs in on your porch or your deck or wherever, you're using what's called a GFCI outlet. It stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. And what that means, all you need to know what that means is that if it does short out, which is unlikely, but if it did, the short would run along the cord and get to that particular outlet, and the outlet would decide to die instead of letting the short go into your house where it would melt the wires and cause a fire, and you lose your house, and then you have to explain how, our house burned down because we were keeping the chicken water warm. So, some people may think, he's going into too much detail on this, but this is important because we had the hurricane last fall, and there was one guy in North Carolina was killed. Do you know how he was killed? He was outside messing around with extension cords and plugging two of them together, and water got in between where the two cords met, and he was holding it like this, and he electrocuted himself. So I'm not trying to freak you out or anything, but it's like one of my rules in all my construction work and whenever I'm building things, if I can avoid having electrical stuff, I try to avoid having electrical stuff outdoors. If I can avoid having moving parts, I try to avoid that. Because those are two things that over time, being exposed to the elements, they just kind of want to fail. So that's just something to be realistic about. So any other questions about the waterer? Yes?
The thing that you put over the extension cords, was that called a clamshell?
Yeah, a little clamshell. It's green. It's
So
two
if I
pieces
Google
of plastic. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and it's $2 or $3. So, and the link between your waterer and your gutter, I recommend one of these. It's like a 4-foot length of this brown plastic, kind of has this accordion thing so you can stretch it out or shrink it down or bend it to the left or right, because the likelihood that your waterer is going to line up perfectly with the end of your gutter is pretty low. So this gives you a lot of freedom to make mistakes, okay? So how about if I tell you about the feeder? So feeders are a problem. The conventional feeder, it's a gravity feeder, which is a metal tube. You dump the food in, the chicken food in, and it spills out onto a saucer, and then the rain makes it wet, and then the rats and mice find it, and then the chickens do two not helpful things. One, in their scratching, because that's their job, is to scratch around looking for bugs and looking for seeds. They scratch stuff around, and all the food gets covered with debris. And then they're squawking, complaining to you because they don't know where their food went. The other thing they do is it's called billing. They're in there eating, and I guess for them it's entertainment. They have to use their beak and fling some of the food out. Maybe it's a competitive sport for them. I'm not sure what's going on. But the conventional feeder is not a good thing, so I found a guy who was doing something kind of like this. I did a little upgrade on it. So this is a feeder. Again, it's going to be mounted on the wall or on a post, and it's about this high off the ground, so the chickens can tap on it. I call it a vending machine. It's like a vending machine. They tap on it, food comes out, right? And I've got a champagne cork here. You could use a wine cork, but I think a champagne cork has just more of a celebratory look to it. And what it's attached to is a eye bolt. I'll pass this around. So the guy whose idea I borrowed, is he had used a bolt, but he had welded some little flap on top. And then instead of a cork, he had used a piece of PVC pipe and some washers and some bolts. And I'm looking at this, and I'm going, the concept is good, but it's too much work and fooling around. So I know how to weld, but I'm not going to weld a little flap on top of a bolt. I'm just going to spend $1 and buy an eye bolt at the store, and we're good to go. And then just drill a hole in a cork and screw it onto the eye bolt, and everything's done. So this has lots of advantages. One, with a lid on it, the rain can't get to it. Critters can't get the food. When the chickens are hungry, they tap on it. Same deal as with the water. You'll have to teach them that. So they tap on it, and pellets come out. It works best with much better with pellets. You can buy chicken feed as crumbles and mash, and if you don't know what that is, it's not worth explaining it. Just you want to get pellets for a setup like this. But much less expensive than buying a gravity feeder, works a lot better than a gravity feeder, And again, if so this holds like a half a bag of feed, and for our 6 chickens, yeah, we're looking at like 3 weeks worth of food there. So we can go on vacation or just ignore them for 3 weeks. If you have more chickens than that, you know, use a second feeder or use a larger container. So
I can't see how the pellets come out.
yeah, I can pass this around.
Okay.
So any other questions about the feeder? Was somebody had their hand up and I missed it? Okay. Last thing I'm going to show you. So this is the nest box. This was what I used on the photo you saw where I marked out the dimensions. I had the guy at the store cut it all for me. I didn't have to do it. Here we've got the, let me put this down. That's the support arm. See what I mean? And then you pop these latches. Comes open. And there's your chicken. And that's how it works. So, again, pretty easily done, pretty cost effective. Questions? Yes. Yeah. He's asking, is it just a screw holding the support arm? Yeah, that's just, so it's a 2x2 piece of wood, which we don't need to go into why this is the way it is, but a 2x2 is actually 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So a screw that's 2 inches long or 2.5 inches long is plenty long to go through it. So you drill out a hole in the support arm that's wider than the threads of the screw. So the screw just goes in and out easily. And then the screw goes into the floor of the nest box. And it's going through here, but you don't drive it all the way. You don't want it to be tight. You want it to be a little bit loose. You'll have to play with it a little bit. And then it swings. When it swings out easily, then you've got that.
That one here.
Yes, right. Yeah, so it goes because you don't want like screws sticking up. Yes.
All right, this is a chicken behavior question.
I love it, yes.
Okay. My hens were attacked by a raccoon in the nest box because somebody forgot to close the door.
Okay, admit it. Admit who you are.
Yes, that's me.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So they don't ever want to be in there again.
Yeah.
How do I teach them to go in there and lay their eggs so that I don't have to hunt the whole yard for eggs every day?
Right. So, because I'm the facilities manager and Chris is the livestock manager, I often defer to her, but she's like a 30-minute drive away. So I'm gonna fake it till I make it on this one. But let me. Do you use a fake egg to get them to lay in the nest box, and they're still not? Raccoon ate the fake egg. What was your fake egg made out of?
Plastic.
Plastic.
Yeah, and it's a crumple now. I can get another fake egg.
Yes.
But they won't even go into the coop to be anywhere near it.
So 2 things. Let me talk about the fake egg for a minute, and then I'll expressly answer your question. So you've set up your coop, you've set up the nest box, everything's set up, you bring the chickens. They don't know you want them to lay eggs in here. They are going to look around, and one of them is going to think, oh, I'm going to lay eggs behind that pillar over there. And the other one is like, no, I'm going to lay an egg behind that sign over there. And so you're in an everyday Easter egg hunt, which is not what you want. So here's what you need. One of the things you need to know about chicken behavior, about chicken culture, chicken thinking, is that you need to get a fake egg, which could be a plastic Easter egg at the feed and seed store. They have wooden ones. They might have ceramic ones. Or if you have a golf ball, plenty close enough, they will think that's an egg. And so you've got your bedding in here. You put 1 or more fake eggs in the nest box. And what will happen, the first chicken that sees that, this is exactly what her brain will do. She'll see that egg, and she'll go, oh, there's a really smart chicken here. who thinks this is a safe place to lay eggs, and because I'm no dummy, I'm going to lay my egg here too. And so that's how they start. That's how they know that you want them to lay eggs here, and that's what will get them to do it. Periodically, you'll feel like you're not getting as many eggs as usual, and because one has somehow got it in her head that, yeah, underneath the coop or something is the place, and you look around and you'll find 6 or 8 eggs piled up. What I do is use one of those tong-type grabbers that has the little rubber suction cups. You can, if it's underneath the coop or someplace hard to get to, you can get them like that, and then ball up a big piece of chicken wire and put it in there so they can't get in. So that's what you'll have to do for the most part. Now, if somebody forgets and leaves the gate open and a raccoon gets in and it killed one, yeah, and you've cleaned it all out and everything. So the chickens don't want to go there because they have a bad association with that, which is how most animals' brains work. They don't have memory the way we have memory. They have associations. So this was associated with the place where the smart chicken had started laying her eggs, and then it became associated with the place where the raccoons got one of our sisters. So 2 things. One is that what memory they do have doesn't last really long. How long ago was this? Yeah, 2 weeks. So depending on the issue, 1 to 4 weeks, and they will have forgotten. Yeah, like when you get new chicks or chickens, introduce them to the pen in a separate container. I like to use a dog kennel where they have their own food and water. And after about a week, the old chickens look at the new chickens and they're thinking, yeah, you've always been here, right? Because a new critter, they're going to attack them. So what you might want to do is so time is an ally here. You might want to create another space like a milk crate or something, put a fake egg in that, so at least they have a place and you're not searching. And over time, I think they will forget about this. The other thing you can do is that recognize the most important thing in almost any animal's mind is food and food and food and food. And mealworms go in here until they kind of decide, oh, I have this bad association, but there are mealworms. And once they start eating mealworms, that association will displace the raccoon association. So that'd be the 2 things I would do. Set up a separate nest box for now and start throwing mealworms or whatever kind of treats you have, kitchen scraps or anything like that. Any other questions? Yes.
We're going to do time for, I saw 2 hands go up, so we'll do 2 and then,
okay.
Then we'll get out.
Last ones.
You were first. Oh, okay. Sorry. So sort of similar question, but my chickens used to put themselves in their coop at night, which was lovely.
Yes.
And they recently, for no particular reason, decided that the top of the coop was the best place to hang out. And it's not a huge deal to move them into their coop every night. But if you had any suggestions to how to get them to go back to their bed, I would not be sad.
Yeah, because when you and your sweetie are at Niagara Falls on vacation, you won't be able to do that. No, so chickens, what they're doing is, chickens are like 2 steps above a wild animal. And in their mind, it's getting dark, and you don't need to herd them into the coop or anything. It's getting dark. They're thinking, I want to get up high off the ground. And so that's what the roost in the coop is doing, is creating that feeling for them and a sense of safety for you also. And so if they can get up onto the roof of the coop, that's higher. That's a higher branch. That's even, in their mind, that's even safer. And so I would try to figure out some kind of barrier that keeps them from doing that. Because they could be up on the roof and they think they're safe, but a raccoon can get up on the roof too, right? Yeah, so you're going to need to come up with some kind of temporary barrier, and that could just be like some surveyor's tape, something lightweight and cheap, just zigzag it around, or some chicken wire or anything. Yeah.
Mine was just more of a thought for you is, have you ever followed the chicken chick? She's called the chicken chick. Chicken chick. She has this spruce the coop, which is a potpourri that chickens like, and it's like spearmint and rose buds and it smells really heavenly. And I will put that in my nesting boxes when I find that my girls don't want to go in there anymore. And sometimes they'll like to go in there and they'll pick at in addition to, of course, the eggs and everything else. And then the other idea is maybe curtains. I don't know if you've looked at nesting box curtains at all, but you can make your own and they might like that too. So maybe just something that changes the look a little bit.
Okay, so last thing I'm going to say is I have, if you don't already have a Hentopia book, I have books to sell. They're $25, cash check or charge. I've entered the 21st century. I have a Square reader. And the other last thing I want to ask is, was this at all helpful? Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think there were a few more questions, but you'll be here once we wrap the show. Folks can come up and chat with you too and ask more questions. So if we didn't get to you, just come, peck on him and get his. See, they laughed at my puns. I don't know what happened. Let's do this. Let's listen to some poetry. Does that sound fun? Some hen habitat poetry. I'm going to invite our poets with living poetry up to the stage. They'll introduce themselves, and we'll hear what they've got to say.
Thanks. I'm Tara Lynn Groth, and I am one of the co-organizers of Living Poetry. If you go on meetup.com and look for Living Poetry, we are the largest group of poets here in the area, and we add open mics, readings, workshops, all to the calendar. And I'm here with Anna Weaver, who has an open mic here in downtown Raleigh on the second Sunday of every month. And Bartholomew Barker, who's also one of our co-organizers, and I think you have a germination workshop coming up this weekend? 2 Sundays from now. Okay, the 25th. So all that is online. And I, like Frank and many of you, have backyard chickens as well. My poem is Vote for Chickens. Let's make this yard great again. A quiet footpath to an egg bounty. Top hen, bottom hen, the full pecking order, promising clean water. A campaign for continued compost. Chocolate eggs on Easter and beyond. Bright yolks to knead into yeast rolls, and pizza for everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd vote for that. They said, I'm Bartholomew Barker. Imagine having to hold it a whole day. You know, it. It's like having an egg, crowning, ready to drop, but all the nests are occupied. I'm no chicken. I don't poop in my sleep. I suppose I could, but I'm not the alpha hen. I can't just kick someone out like the president. I'll be the one who has to wait, pacing the pen, pecking like a telegraph, as my mind is slowly consumed by a single thought. If we laid eggs, what would we make omelets with?
My name is Anna Weaver. Brace yourself for a love story, practical as plywood, nail, and bucket. Brace yourself for hierarchy. Chickens do not believe in equality. But neither do they practice the perfectionism of architecture, so let the angles of your roof arc however they may. This is a love story for the messy but patient. A love story built with found materials. This is a love story. Trust in gravity and friction to hold it together. Raise the floor. This is a love story. See to it that it won't rot. Keep the rain out. This is a love story. Brace yourself. Put on your muck boots. This is a love story.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great stuff every time. I don't know why y'all here aren't. Y'all should come every week. That would be just the best. Every week, fun science poetry. One note. The surveys that you've been handed, they wanted me to say, if you have filled this survey out before, you don't have to do it again. If you've not filled it out before, you do have to do it. You absolutely have to help us do the best science communication and science events that we can do. Folks, thanks for coming out to the Science Cafe tonight. We will be back here again next Thursday night at 7 o'clock and every Thursday at 7 o'clock with new things for you to learn, new information for you to take home. Check out naturalsciences.org, or you can also put your email address on the tiny slip of paper, and we'll let you know what topics are coming up. We'll add you to the event newsletter list. Thanks for coming out. Have a great night, everybody.